Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talking Headless, episode 15. My numbers may be wrong, but don't hold that against me. I'm venerable. So this is a new format. Okay. It's my fourth format since I started this thing. Um, Hopefully, it's long lasting. Given the guests I have, it's going to be forever because these are amazing guests. Kind of here's the idea. Look, I've been an industry analyst for decades, even though I refused to admit it for about 10 of those years. I just called myself a chameleon when somebody said, "What are you?" I said, "Whatever you want me to be is fine." Right. So, but I have been. And typically, when industry analysts do shows, they're pretty much about the industry, right? And that's it. But it's a different world now. And one aspect that gets ignored constantly by my brethren and me, not, let's say this, finally, not by me or Brent or some of the others who are getting it now, is that we're dealing continually with people from corporate communications and analyst relations who are amazing at what they do. I mean, their job is to deal with a bunch of peckish people like us, right? And actually try to get us to do something that is helpful to their companies. At the same time, they have to have the kind of personalities and skills and experience to not just handle us, but to establish ongoing relationships with us. And there's a science to it as well as an art. And so it occurred to me that it's time for them to get their due from the industry analysts, right? That we should start not just dealing with them every day that we do, but actually start talking to them and speaking with them publicly and start promoting them, right? So that we can so you can see the kind of people they are and what they do and how they do it, because there's a wealth of experience out there. The person who actually triggered me thinking about this a while back was Robin Schaefer when I had her on as a guest. And then I started thinking, why don't I just start bringing this stuff up all the time? It makes complete sense. The other side of it is the expansion of what we view as analysts. Look, we're in a world now where obviously one of the big problems is why the existence of PPN and sort of was the existence of CRM Play's purpose too, was we're dealing in a world where the content creation, distribution, and consumption are just either are very different than what they were because millennials now are running the world, and or need to be very different than what they were. And that also means how we cover things, what we cover. So the other guest, and I'll introduce them as we get there, the other guest I have, we're not just talking about what's the world of business tech. We're going to be talking about things like media, right? And what that actually means, and content creation, distribution, and consumption, and what are the kind of things that we're seeing out there? What do we have to do? What are the new models we have to look at? How do we have to look at it? And we're going to be talking in both cases when it comes to corporate communications and when it comes to the analyst side, real thought leaders in the space on both ends. The only other thing I want to go over with you before we get to the show is Brent and I have made some serious progress on IRL 2024, which, as you may or may not know, is the celebration of CRM Play's 15th year, and is also a PPN production and our first IRL in real life event. We're doing it in Atlanta. It will be the evening of November 11th and all day November 12th. It's going to be different than most events. I guess the best way to put this is, if you look at what PPN is, we're not just a group of thought leaders or self-promoting thought leaders, right? We're not just a group of thought leaders and analysts. We're also a media company, and there's no question about it. And media plays a huge role, as we're going to find out shortly, in how we interact with people, what we do with people, how we impact people over the coming years. So Brent and I have a lot of very creative things that we're working on. I'll reveal only, this is probably the least creative, but might have some real impact too. One of the things we'll be doing, and it's probably the one that will close the show, is the CRM Watch List Grand Finale Awards, the GFAs. And what these are not like the old CRM watch list I ran for 19 years, where I was the only judge and read 6,000 pages on companies how to submit things. These are effectively their lifetime achievement awards. Over the years, who's had the greatest global impact? Who's the best corporate communications person? Who's the best executive assistant? Which company has the best CX platform? It's a variety of things. And by the way, depending on some feedback I get, none of those categories might be that I just mentioned might be in the finals, or all of them might be in. But instead of me doing this by myself this time, we have 39 other thought leaders and analysts who are on the panel who are going to be making the decisions with me on these achievements. And the winners will be announced at the event. There's a lot of other things which involve a lot of audience, live audience interaction. It involves digital presence before and after the show. It involves live streaming the entire event. It involves at least 3 live streams going on simultaneously, possibly as many as 4 throughout the event. You'll see. There's plenty more coming. We'll start releasing it as we go along. Okay. Now let's get down to the show. We're going to start with one of the most incredible, if just calling her corporate communications is probably limiting really how incredible she really is. That happens to be her specialty, but let me put it this way. I've known this person for getting close to probably 15, 17 years. I met her when she was probably, I don't know, 13. And she was already an accomplished professional in AR at the time with Adobe. We had a meeting in San Francisco. I can't remember the name of the restaurant. It's across the street from the Embarcadero, and had this big room, and it has lots of tables. And I had laryngitis, and I could barely say anything. But it was the most amazing meeting. This person, to give you an idea, is not only accomplished, experienced, has just intuitive skills that most people don't have, but at the same time is one of the most humane and nicest humans I think I've ever known. She cares about people. She cares about animals. She cares about the world. She cares about the success of everything that she ever touches, and she touches people and touches their hearts, as well as gets things done that have to be done, because that's the other side. When she has to be tough, she's tough. I met her. I'll put it this way. Here's the best way. I'm going to give you the second big hint on who she is. In 2018, she joined Zoho. At the time, she was running mostly AR. Now it's a much bigger role. Zoho at the 2018 conference, right before she joined, had 2 analysts, me and Brent, because we've known Zoho for years and we were speaking. The last Zoho Analyst Summit, which was this year, she had nearly 100, no, I take it back, 100 analysts from I don't know how many countries, but multiple countries. And here's the thing. She's made Zoho, which was a stealthy company, a big public name. And at the same time, analysts loved this company. They love Zoho. So she, of course, will attribute it to her team and the management, but let's put it, I'll give you one more thing and then we're going to bring her on. At the last Zoho summit last year, or 2 summits ago, Sridhar Vembu, the CEO and founder of Zoho, was up speaking to all of us. And when he was done, he said, okay, now I'm going to turn the program back to the real boss, Sandy Lowe. So let's bring on Sandy Lowe. Welcome, boss. How you?
I can hear you talk all day. You're making me blush.
Well, true. I mean, every word is true. I the funny thing is I sound very verbose about these things, but I'm not saying one thing that isn't true. So you're an extraordinary person, and you're extraordinary at what you do too. And that's something I think there's a lot of people out there who don't quite understand that. So, for example, there's a lot of people that don't understand the difference between analyst relations and public relations. They don't understand the difference. They don't understand what corporate communications is in context of analyst relations, public relations, or separately from either. So, can you just start with the basics for people? Because again, you're the first person appearing in this slot ever. So, can you just go through those basics for people?
Yeah, so I'll start with corporate communications, right? So corporate communications is this wider umbrella and includes PR, media relations, right? And then analyst relations. There's a lot of content and thought leadership. There's sometimes customer advocacy. And for public companies, there is investor relations as well. And sometimes there is executive communications and crisis communication, the category that nobody wants. But it's a whole communication discipline to make sure that a company stays on message and that we are dealing with each of the stakeholders the way they deserve to be interacted with. So I guess the main difference, because, I actually started out in PR. I actually was in PR for much longer than I've been on the AR side. And even now I touch a lot of the media relations side. And I think that with AR, the relationship is long-term. Not that it isn't with journalists, but it is long-term because as the industry transforms, the analyst thinking transforms, and the way that we need to be in tune with the industry also transforms. And I think that, the way that companies use analysts is multi-dimensional. Some might need something transactional like an evaluation. But in most cases, we need the advice, we need the know-how, we need their honest feedback to continue to advance and serve our customers better. So it's a multi-dimensional relationship, whereas I feel, and this is my personal opinion, with the media, there is absolutely a relationship element to it, but it's very much about, well, this is what we are announcing. And we want your perspective, and we want your readers, and we want others to get your take on what this is. So it's less multidimensional, but nonetheless quite important as well. So that's the best way I would put it, Paul.
So here's a funny thing, though. So we're in this world now where, to your point, really, some of the media people are actually thought leaders in the way they approach things as opposed to reporters, right? But most of the media report. But you get some people who are, let's say, crossing that chasm, like David Myron was one when he was at CRM magazine. Don Fluckinger has been back and forth there. And David, of course, is now at Omnia as a media, as a analyst. You have people like Larry Dignan, right, who's working at Constellation now, where if you look at Larry's work, Larry comes from the world of journalism, but if you look at Larry's work, it's always been, let's call it, more editorial than reportorial, meaning, he's much more of an analyst the way he thinks. How do you think about people like that? Because you're starting to blur lines and, you put the wrong person. Let's say this has happened many times. I will get someone reach out to me from PR. Okay. And they're nice people. It's not like they're not nice, but all they care about when they get down to it is that I place an article about the company somewhere. Right? That's it. And I keep trying to tell them that's not how this works. Right? So, but they don't get it. Now you're dealing with these other people like the David Myrons, or others who are journalists who did understand. How'd you treat those people?
You're right. The lines are blurring, and there are new definitions out there and new rules of the game. And it's interesting because, all these names that you just named, and I'll throw another one in, Doug Hensham. Doug, before he joined Constellation, was someone that I actually dealt with quite a lot, right? And so it's interesting when I hear these names, the folks who never actually just looked at a press release and changed a few words and repost, The folks who actually took the time to analyze and put in their perspective are the ones who are now succeeding in this new era. And I feel like the folks who only just took your press release and, cut and pasted chunks and, put content out there for clicks are the ones who I feel like are trying to redefine themselves, redefine the publication, redefine, their readership. So, I think that people are looking for insight now. We are absorbing content, video content, written content, audio content. There's so much content out there. And we, as smart consumers of content, very instantly know who is providing value and who isn't. And if you're not the ones providing value or taking the time to make the output a little more meaningful, I think, it's you're not going to succeed in this new era of content production.
So let's add this other dimension to it, because there's one other one that I'm always in awe of how you deal with it, and you arguably deal with it better than anybody I know, which is dealing with the personalities of analysts, which are, let's say, look, there are a lot of extremely nice human beings in the world of analysts, but there are also a lot of jerks too, to be honest. There's a lot of people who are just annoying and self-righteous and problematic and think that they're entitled. And it's just, I'm painting a very broad brush, obviously, and I'm not trying to denigrate any one person or another, but it is a world of, let's say, the personalities are a little more extreme in the world of industry analysts than it is the rest of the world. How do you deal with that? I don't have a clue.
Oh, this is going to be a fun question one day if you get a bunch of us together that handle analyst relations for some time. We've got some funny stories, but, I think the way to deal with it is treat them as human beings. We all have our best moments and our worst moments. And, when someone is at their worst, or they have high expectations, or they feel this need to lash out at something, is to try to really know that they are humans. Maybe the weather is too hot and it's not a good day for hot soup. There are a lot of interesting, anecdotes out there, but ultimately my team and I would say all my colleagues, we look on the bright side. We look at the positives. What, do they bring to the relationship, and what, who they are as human beings when the situation is, a little different. I think it's so important for us to not look at our relationship as transactional. And that is, one of the top rules is that you guys are all individuals. You have things that you're going through. This is a job, dealing with us vendors, hearing us present slides after slides. My goodness, that is one tough job, and going from one airport to another. So,
to be honest, it is a lot of work, but at the same time, we live a pretty good life when it boils down to, we're treated well by people. Generally, let's say this: if you're a foodie and an analyst, you're in a really good place to be. It's true. You eat really well. You're treated well. People cover expenses that you ordinarily would cover yourself. Things like that are being done for you, and understandably. So I don't, I'm a little tougher on the analyst crew, I think, than you are in that regard. I think we're obligated, because we should be honored that someone cares enough to literally pay attention to our opinion, number one. And number two, at times, even to pay for the advice. It's an opinion. It's not God's word. It's an opinion, right? So I'm not 100% certain that I would cut them the slack you do, but at the same time, I get it. Look, I always seen that when you've had difficult situations, how you've handled them, because I've seen it. I literally have seen it. And you're always operating in a humane way, always. So here's the other side. You're building an event. We've got one coming up June 4th. All right. You're responsible for at least the analyst portion plus a bunch of other things that you have to do, but at least on the analyst side, let's say. So you have to have what? Separate tracks, separate, you know, separate I'll call it, separate amenities. You have to handle all of that. You have to make decisions on this person's going to meet with this person, but this person might want to meet with this person, but this person doesn't have the time for them to meet with them, so they can't meet with this person. And you're going to deal with maybe an upset person. You're gonna have to. You have a. I don't know how many analysts are coming to this one, but I'm just going to use a number, 70 analysts who you're trying to accommodate, all of whom, to your point, are individual humans. How do you even think about the idea of accommodating that large number? Like, what are the things you put in place that allow you to, in effect, cover the most common ground that allows for supporting those 70 individuals as best you can?
Sometimes I don't think I have brain space left because, despite the number, whatever it is, it was 120 plus as a whole day in February. And next week, we are hosting 93 and about 25% are media. So it's a good mix of media and analysts. And, no matter the number, we really do try everything we possibly can to make sure everyone is treated as individuals. There's not going to be, like we're not hurting cows because everyone has different needs. So, part of it is the past relationship, past interaction, what you guys prefer, what you guys don't prefer. Knowing that, right? Like, for example, Brent Leary, I know what type of drink he wants. I know what Brian Summers' drink is. I know whose kid is going off to college. I mean, these are all things. Somehow there is a file in here that we keep track of. But I think it comes down to their needs. How do we help them do their job better? I know someone who, for example, doesn't want to meet with anybody, just want the top quotes that you can put in a blog and that's it. And that's what I will provide that person with, right? And to your earlier question on, not multiple, but different personalities, let's just, put it this way. I mean, people in my role, we will always remember and be appreciative of those who are courteous and kind. While we deal with all personalities and everyone as individuals. So I'll put it that way.
To your point, it's a two-way street. It always has. That's the idea of relationship. It's two sides to every one of them. And again, coming from the analyst side, I know one of my personal policies, is that I will never, even if I know the individual I want to meet with at a company, if I'm dealing with analyst relations at that company, I will never go around analyst relations to set up that meeting, right? I will always go to them, even though that person could literally be my next door neighbor or my brother, right? It wouldn't have mattered. I would still go to analyst relations because, it's their part of their job. They're responsible for me. And I know that, right? And so it would be not only disrespectful, but bad for them if you just work around them just because you happen to know the person or don't want to have to deal with them, which is wrong. And I know that people do go around, sometimes not to be mean, just because I've known this guy for 800 years and he's my second best or best friend ever, right? So I'll just give him a call and see if he wants to talk. Once in a while, and I know the way I've always dealt with it too is I'll be talking to that actual person at a conference and say, hey, afterwards, you want to get together? And then and he'll say, yeah. And so I'll then say, hey, AR person, by the way, I talked to so-and-so, we'd like to set up something. Can you help? Right. That minimally, if it was just an, conversation at some place where I was literally talking to that actual person at the time, I still go back to analyst relations to handle it. Now, let me ask you this, because this goes to another aspect. As I said, the AR people are accountable to, for us. I assume that, and I don't know how Zoho does it specifically, but I assume that like anyone else, there are some sort of KPIs for AR people. There may not be. I mean, honestly, I'm so right-brained, I don't even know what those are. But given where we are in a new world where a lot of the KPIs of 10 years ago, well, let me back it up with a story. There was a very prominent AR professional in our universe who was caught in uh, a reduction of workforce reduction, and she put out a big thanks to everybody, but she basically really she was just outlining her accomplishments on how she turned analysts, and like she literally like her thing was it was literally her KPIs, and they were offensive when I read them. To me, I was like, now this is somebody I've never personally cared for, to be honest. Other analysts I know did like this person. But when I read that, to me, it was just like offensive. This was basically how well I managed to manipulate and change the minds of analysts, right? And all the things I did and there were all these like old school kind of, 10 years ago, if you're talking to Gartner and Forrester only KPIs, which to me now don't make any sense. How do you think about KPIs in this new universe? How is it different?
Not everything is measurable, and I think, luckily, I work for an organization where quantifiable KPIs are not the only thing that matters, right? And so it's, I think that it's trust, the trust that the individual product teams have in you, the trust that the leadership team has in you, the trust that you see the leadership team start to build when it comes to taking in analyst feedback and implementing analyst feedback. So I am talking specifically about my role now,
Right.
where, the KPIs, okay, sure. We can certainly put a number to how many people wrote recaps after Zoho Day, how many people did video clips after Zoho Day, but they don't matter to me personally as much as the increased trust people have in analyst relations as a discipline. And that itself is not, there's no right formula for that. There's no numbers and equation you plug in to measure something like that. A lot of it is what you see, how the teams start to interact differently, how the teams internally at Zoho have started to open up more. And it's a process. It's not the easiest thing to do. And I think, to me, seeing that year after year, and I just crossed my 6 years at Zoho, it's been a wonderful 6 years. That to me is a measure of me and my team delivering on our responsibilities.
So, all right. So there's a lot of young AR people out there. In fact, I know several at companies. One company, which I won't mention specifically, but very young, brand new AR, has never done AR, was not trained in it, nothing, was put in the role, actually doing quite a good job, to be honest. I mean, really good job, but is a rookie. So you have this rookie, clearly has some talent, gets it. What do you advise them over the next year or two to do? So let's close with some really good advice to these young people.
Yeah, I think that, and I tell people on my own team this is two things that you don't ever want people to identify you as. One is become an evaluation mole. I use that word. There are so many different firms who are trying to do so many different evaluations. Our job is not just to be the one to fill out RFIs and the ones to feed into these evaluations. It's so much more than that, so don't be an evaluation mole. And second is, don't ever become someone who is the scheduler, where our role is a strategic role when done right. We're not the one when Paul wants to talk to, so-and-so, we make it happen. Sure, that is part of our role, like you said, because we are sort of the keepers of the corporate messaging. Right. That is our role. But that is not our only role. And I think, analyst relations professionals, young to old, need to figure out how to bring the strategic piece out, and really make sure that, whether it's to sales, to product management, to leadership, to business, to growth, to partner ecosystem, whatever that piece is, we bring the strategy in. And that's my advice. And that is my advice to every
Well, actually, there is
professional.
an ultimate question. It's not the Patriots, by the way. So Brent has the question. Here it is.
Oh boy. Oh my gosh. Brent is, if for those who are listening and don't know, Brent is obsessed with Hunger Games. Okay. So my favorite character is Katniss.
Why? I mean, I
She's
can guess.
badass.
But...
She's badass. I don't know who else. I don't know Hunger Games. I only know Katniss. So, hi, Vinny.
And yeah, and he's right. Well, you always change because you evolve, but he's right fundamentally. Don't ever. I adore you completely, and I think you're one of the best I've ever known, best people I've ever known, not just best AR people I've ever known. So thank you, Sandy. I will see you June 4th.
Yes. Oh, Paul, one quick thing that I forgot to mention.
Sure.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Also, one thing that I feel like has guided me is to never stop learning and be humble. I mean, I'm still learning. I ask for feedback. I ask for feedback all the time. And I'm always trying to improve how we do things every single time. And that's another piece of advice that I think is really important. Okay, I'm done. Thanks for having me.
You're just beginning, and we're going to have you back too, by the way. I will have you back. All right. Big hug. I will talk to you soon.
Hug. All righty.
Wow. I love her. I just think she's the best. I go a long way back with her, and I intend to go, given that I'm venerable, I tend to I'll go as long way forward as I got. Right. So with her too, she's remarkable. And by the way, for those of you out there, and I don't want to put any undue burden on her, but she's a remarkable mentor. I've actually directed people to her, and they've spoken with her, and every one of them comes back with, "Oh my God, that was so helpful. That was so good." So if you're interested, you can contact me, but I'll operate as her agent. I'm an official agent now. All right. So I now want to move on to the second and final segment of the show. And this one's different. Okay. I mean, first of all, the person we're going to be talking to is different. He is a pioneer in so many different areas. If I'll put it this way, he's impacted the world of music. He's impacted the world of comedy. He's impacted the world of cinema. He's impacted the world of social media, and he's impacted the world of business technology. All of those worlds, all of them. He's the kind of person who, I guess the best way to put it, he just innovates continuously. He's innovating models, and at the same time knows how to build sustainable presences. For example, and I'm not going to tell you the name because I'm not going to give away his name quite yet. For example, he literally has created what became the second podcast in the history of podcasts, and is now a continuing live stream that happens on Fridays or Sundays. The other thing about him is, in the industry, at least in the PPN world, he's the only other person called venerable besides me. Right. And I will tell you something. This guy, every time you speak with him, you learn something. Every single time he has a new idea for a new model. And the interesting thing is he can tie it. I mean, this guy is literally capable of tying it back to stories about the Beatles, for God's sake. He's absolutely remarkable in his scope, in his experience, in his creativity and innovation, and his mindset. I met him. I was keynoting the very first and last Radiant 6 user conference in Boston. And I met this guy, and we just he was at the time he was at Salesforce, and we just kind of hit it off. And we would start talking, and then he started sort of telling me about his life, and I was blown away. I was blown away. And I'm going to go to one specific, and then we're introducing here. One of the things that blew me away, and very few of you will have any idea who this is that I'm about to mention, was that he basically produced a group called the Firesign Theater, right? For those of you who don't know what that is, that was in the 60s. And I will tell you, and I think make a very arguable case that things like Steve Martin, Saturday Night Live, Monty Python probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for the kind of comedy that Firesign Theater basically pioneered. They were a remarkable and very underappreciated group who drove contemporary comedy. The impact of them on contemporary comedy some 60 plus years later is absolutely off the charts outstanding. The gentleman who produced them, Steve Gillmor, my buddy, the venerable Steve Gillmor. Here we are.
Hi.
Hi, venerable Steve Gillmor.
Hi, venerable Paul.
We're the only two who get the title. That's sort of really nice and kind of sad at the same time.
Yeah, I'm with the kind of sad part.
So, Steve, look, you're again, to me, you're a thought leader and you're a real thinker and we are in a world where things are they're just different than they were years ago. And how are you thinking about where things are and where they got to go and why they got to go there too? Because that's the other thing you do, which nobody else does. They might think, here's the trend, here's this, but you have the why. And that's the part, and you see it in your writing all the time. So can you talk to that a little bit, and please include the why?
Well, my opinions and perspective on this has really not changed very much over the years. It seems and seemed obvious to me that the technology and the media were, coming together. As a matter of fact, a few weeks ago, I was on I got a message on a Firesign Theater group on Facebook, I believe it was.
Okay.
They were asking about, how come there aren't any new Firesign Theaters? And, it's like, who's the next Bob Dylan kind of question.
Mm-hmm.
And, and specifically referencing the technology. We're able to do with the new iPad, for example. I have one, but I haven't actually opened the box. But I can surmise that there's this ability to be able to create the kinds of things that we used to do in the recording studio or on location in the film world. We're able to do them basically on the natch with the technologies that are available, particularly the cloud, particularly so on and so forth. So, the question was, why aren't there new people? Well, first of all, there are new people. We just don't know who they are. And secondarily, to the sort of underlying conceit, if you will, of this conversation that we're having. And Sandy, I think, was very eloquent on this from the perspective of how do you create authenticity and credibility and pass that along while doing a good job. We're in a point now where not only can we do this essentially from anywhere, but if we don't, then we don't understand what the prime motivation is of not the analysts so much as the people who look at the world and are looking to analysts and thought leaders and the media in general to help them understand what's important. There's so much information out there that we have access to that the criteria for how we spend our time and become productive and pass that value along to the people we work with and for is the real issue. And I think that roll up of responsibility for how we allocate our time and our personas, if you will, is so much more transformative than whether or not, I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, to your point, I think the technology, obviously, that part allows us to do things a lot more conveniently, I guess. Look here, this is the same one that you haven't opened the box for yet. This application is running every light in this place but one. So for here, I'll just show you. I just shut off all my lights by hitting one button, and I just turn them all back on, right? And that's literally probably 8-10 different lights in here, and I can adjust everything individually. So it takes nothing to do that, which leaves me more time to figure out what to do with a show. Well, how to create something different, because I don't have to worry about the technology once it's in the cloud, linked and hooked. It's a matter of a button press and an iPad. And where 40, 50 years ago, it was 5 lighting technicians making adjustments nonstop on 10 different lights on 2 sets, right? So to your point there, I 1,000% agree. I guess the other side, though, to me, that I'd like to get your take on is the consumption is different. You've always been ahead of the game when it comes to consumption. Like, for example, with the Gillmor Gang, second podcast ever, that was an audio podcast initially, right?
Well, there was no video back in that.
That's exactly. But before video was a big thing, when it was coming a thing, you went video, right? In other words, you're always ahead of the game. Yeah, and
I got fired for going video.
Why is that? What was the reasoning?
The company that I was working with, that was the host. Well, I mean, I can't talk about it, but the point is I said, yeah, we need to go video, and the word came back, no, you're not going to do that.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was. But these are serious issues. Going video and understanding the transition. I mean, the Fireside Theater, for example, and I don't want to harp on them.
Please harp on it. Believe me, I think people need to hear about it.
It was one of the catchphrases for them was, it was the theater of the mind.
Yeah.
And from a production value, as a producer or as a director, you're always looking for how you can get the most bang for the buck on the screen. And the Fireside, one of the key elements of their success, I think, was they understood, coming from a fascination and a love of old time radio,
yep,
that you could get incredible, essentially unlimited production value by using the sound rather than the visuals as the method of suggesting, enhancing, improving, etc. So so going video was more a challenge in terms of, why are we doing this? Why do you think that there's so much? I mean, you guys have got this PPN network now. Why are you doing this at a fundamental level? What is it that you're trying to bring?
Well, I want to go back to Fireside Theater, because you made a really critical point there, because I remember this. It triggered. I used to listen to them on the midnight special in Chicago. That's literally, I stayed up. Well, I was young. I stayed up very late then, but nowadays that would be a chore. I got to stay up till midnight to listen. But back then it was I'd listen to the midnight special, and they would always carry the Fireside Theater, always. And it was why I listened to it. And I do remember something, even back then, I used to think that I could visualize sound. That was literally the way I thought about it, And I remember thinking about it that way. Like I could see the sound. It was so well done with that. And, you know, think of like Guy Noir when they do the detective stuff. The sound was instrumental in that. And sometimes it was just a person walking a clump outside on a dark street at night. And they didn't even tell you. They might have said it was a dark street. They might not have. But by the clump, you knew it was a dark street at night, right? Just by the clump, right? Just the way it was done.
The sound effects were funny.
They were fantastic. And I that carried me a long way to understanding the impact of any of this stuff. So, but here's the thing with you too, is you've always seen it. I know you are an incredibly good writer. Like you're really, really good writer. Like just writing skills are outstanding. And you're very good at writing visually too. I mean, meaning when you write, it's highly descriptive and you can see what you're writing. And a lot of the stuff you write with some analogy to it could be a rock group at the time or something, you know, contemporary. But you're a highly visual person in that regard. So when you're thinking in terms of video and when you're thinking in terms of being visual, because you're utilizing, interestingly enough, I don't think you just utilize video to be visual, writing, video, sound, all of it. You're multimedia visual, right? So to speak. How do you actually think about, okay, I want to apply this to something I'm writing, or I want to produce this to something that actually is a video, like the way you do the Gillmor Gang, let's say on a production level, or I want to utilize this sound to create this image in the brain of someone else. I mean, how do you actually, like, if you're systematizing that in some way, or maybe you're not, how do you do that?
It reminds me of an old friend, one of the great pioneer musicians, Paul Butterfield.
I loved him.
You know, that was the loudest and first incredible music that I ever heard in person at the Club 47 in Cambridge. And we worked together quite a bit in the early stages of using portable, you know, digital equipment essentially to move the studio to, in this case, the living room. And we recorded a bunch of stuff where I got to see something which I had already understood about Paul, because he was an incredible synthesist. The Butterfield Band's East-West record was a triumph that, you know, you talk about the Beatles. I mean, the Beatles learned from Paul Butterfield, not the other way around.
That album was literally one of my top 10 albums of all time.
Yeah. And there's this one thing that happened, the way we had the mic set up, and I don't want to take too much time with this, but basically we're feeding the mics in the room back into the speakers and basically the talkback system, because Paul had worked with and his partner had worked with Al Green's engineer and producer in I guess it was Nashville, I'm not sure, really exploiting this overtone kind of sound of live. When the band started recording as their own unit, they did so. They basically took over practice rooms and Sammy Davis's laundry room to you know, basically bring this experience of playing as a group in a circle into the recording process. And that's
wow.
You know, so it occurred. I watched Paul pick up. I mean, he was one of the noted harmonica harp players in the universe, basically. So you know, I always was amazed by that, but I didn't realize that he actually had this facility with the acoustic guitar. And it wasn't like he was a great player, but he had this sensibility about the overtones. So I would see him, we're working on a track or an idea, or he's just, spitballing, where he turns the guitar over and turns it into a drum, basically. And then this motion of, as the overtones swell up in the room and go through the speakers in the system, him moving the guitar around so that you could see and hear the impact of this, what I consider to be very symphonic orchestral vision of what music is really about. So, this is not technology, but it is an extreme awareness of how technology can integrate.
Yeah, well, it's basically the art of technology as opposed to the science of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is fantastic. Again, you're talking about one of my young icon. Well, still an icon to me, of course. But I grew up my late teen years with listening, and early 20s listening to Paul Butterfield all the time. And East West I had the LP. I think my brother still has it, actually. I'll have to talk to AR so I can talk to him.
So to close the loop on what I'm trying to project here a little bit, which is the opportunity right now that I think is going on with what you're doing with PPN, what various people are doing in terms of synthesizing this work from anywhere kind of model. I personally think that we're in an interim period where the companies that are going to be most successful are going to stop running away from that model and survive and prosper based on embracing the sort of pseudo-pandemic model of understanding the relationship between digital and collaboration. I think that's, I think that we'll see. And people who are smart, and I don't include me in this, I'm talking about just all of us, when we realize that how we choose the tools that we can use to project our ideas and, as you say, art out into our daily lives are going to be the most successful and are going to give the best chance to their friends, families, and so on.
So just for those of you who might want to take this further, we're going to carry this conversation because this is a really important conversation, and Steve is arguably the guy to be listening to about it, because we're looking forward here, and we're looking at a world that's fundamentally transformed. It's not, not incremental. And Steve's still got a handle on this. And as you just heard, he's got a history that shows he's not dealing with the science of technology only. He's not dealing with technology only. He's dealing with the art of technology and the technology of art too. So if you're interested, please get a hold of us and we will hook you up with Steve further, and watch this channel, PPN, for future shows on this very subject with Mr. Gillmor. So with that, Steve, thank you. And I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you very much, Sandy, for coming on. And I guess we will see you in about a month. Bye.
I've been messed up and broken into two. I didn't know I was pretty till I took a look at you, and I'm rolling. Yeah, I'm still rolling. Baby, there ain't nothing I can move, and I still got the blues rolling. Hey!
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast.